Greetings, this is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. My talk today focuses on the recent news and the destruction of the stock price that was associated with Tesla coming in July with a 22,000 vehicles produced and sold number, which was below Wall Street estimates. Bonjour, wie geht's? Du stehst noch immer auf zwei Beinen. Здравствуйте. Guten Tag. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. There are a number of issues that have popped up in the last couple of days for Tesla, and I wanted to perhaps unpack this a little bit in two sections. My first section is to sort of focus on Tesla missing their build number of 27,000 and instead, I believe, coming in with a 22,000 number. I think they were 3,000 below, so that might be slightly off. What's interesting about this to me is since January of this year, I've been visiting the local Tesla operation in DC, perhaps once a month, once every couple of weeks. And I found a very strange phenomenon happening, which was that if the first time I booked a drive in the Model X, I arrived, did my test drive. The vehicle I test drive in early January was one of those vehicles that was left over from the let's say, January 1 build that was on lifetime supercharger and that was operating with the Autopilot 1. Very smooth vehicle, worked well, everything was fine. I then came back, I think 2 weeks later, and I wanted to take a look at some features of the vehicle again, and they said it had been sold, and I was like, wow, it's an expensive car. I was surprised that people with a lot of money would want to purchase a showroom model rather than order their own. At that time, I think the listed wait time was about 8 to 10 weeks to get your vehicle. That vehicle was immediately on the floor and someone bought it. I was shocked by this because the Autopilot 2 was already out, and therefore it was strange to see someone willing to take the risk of a vehicle that had already been built and with Autopilot 1 and not Autopilot 2. So that was kind of surprising to me because some customers were very angry when they had ordered their vehicle, paid for it, got it, and then a week later Autopilot 2 was put on the new vehicles, so there were a lot of angry customers there. So I was surprised. I then left, came back a couple of weeks later, let's say February, and I was shocked to find that instead of the inventory of 2 or 3 Model X's usually in place, all of a sudden there's one Model X available to be test driven. The other one was sitting there, but it had already been sold. So I was surprised because the inventory of Model S's was ambulatory, sitting on the floor. Everybody's looking at it, but it's going nowhere. So this little dance started happening where you'd walk into the showroom. There used to be 3 vehicles, 2 different Model X or S configurations with one Model X in the middle. All of a sudden, the Model X's started disappearing like crazy, and the Model S's were just sitting on the floor languishing. So I was kind of surprised by this, probably for a number of reasons, but perhaps should not have been. The first reason is that it turns out right now that with all the high-end manufacturers, what they're finding is that 59% of the vehicles being purchased right now are actually SUVs. So the fact that the Model X only came out, I guess, middle of last year, which is 2016, was an impactor on sort of customer interest because they can now get copies of it. And I was also, like I said, impressed that people are willing to pay for the vehicle even though they're not getting to order every feature they want. The Model X is a little different than the others because there's almost no feature that's not included. So it is easier to buy an off-the-floor model. So I was kind of intrigued how all this was working out. because all of a sudden the news came yesterday that they missed their number, and Tesla claimed that the problem was they'd run out of battery packs. And my sort of empirical experience wasn't a missing battery pack issue, is what the battery packs were all built into Model S's that it was announced a few days ago that are sitting on the market unsold. So I think this raised alarm bells as to, has the Tesla miracle ended, kind of what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. My read of this whole situation is what's actually going on is that there's a cannibalization process occurring with the Model S. Most of the people who had the cash to purchase the Model S already have done so. There's a large pent-up demand for the Model X, and they built too many S's. So right now you're having large inventories of S's, and what I perceive as a waiting list for the Model X. So the numeric challenges that Tesla has experienced relative to sales, I think, will be cleared up by all of a sudden a lot of folks being able to purchase a Model X because they've produced more to meet demand. Now, interestingly enough, this morning I was talking with a friend whose family lives, in essence, above the factory, and he and his family drive by the plant 2 or 3 times a day. And he made an interesting comment, which was, he said, you know, it's very strange, but I kept driving by, and there are all these, this was 2 or 3 weeks ago, there are all these trucks exiting the plant with Model X's, but no S's. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, that sounds like it makes sense to me in terms of what's happening. So I believe what we can expect to happen is that I think Tesla will return to being able to put out solid numbers, but I think the way the numbers are going to work out is the Model S will start declining in terms of the sales mix, and the number of Model X's will start rising. And I think that the way things are being built, we're actually getting sort of, that's occurring currently, and that's my sort of empirical analysis of what's going on with the numbers. I also find it strange that Tesla mentioned that there was a shortage of batteries. I don't have the answer to this, but I find it strange because the batteries that are being built for the X and the S currently are still the Panasonic batteries from Japan, and the Gigafactory isn't making any of these. So I found it kind of weird that they were talking about shortage of batteries. Is it shortage of batteries because you put them all in S's and you can't pull the batteries out of those S's to put them in X's? Is it a shorter battery because in Japan there are some supply chain issues for Panasonic getting enough battery packs put together as needed? I don't have an answer to that question, but the explanation given by Tesla that I just described to you, I felt like it raised more questions for me about what's going on than not, because I feel like what I've been seeing in the showrooms sort of is consistent with the numbers, in that people are waiting for their X's and don't want to buy an S, and the S and the X are not close enough to each other as vehicles for waiting X owners to bail out and go with a Model S. So I'm kind of intrigued by, you know, what exactly is going on here, and I don't feel like my gut is what I shared in terms of data, and so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out with their next announcement of vehicles sold. My general read is that the Model S sales are being cannibalized by the Model 3, and if Tesla doesn't aggressively move to get numbers on the Model 3, that cannibalization, I'm going to say, would get worse. But I think that what will save the day in the short term is the fact that the Model S demand is actually quite robust, and Tesla is currently making vehicles to actually meet that demand. So I don't see a huge problem here with them getting their numbers right, especially now that they've stopped building S's. I am wondering about this whole battery shortage, because if that's a real issue, how and when are they going to solve that so that they can get their sales back on track? My next video, I'm actually going to get into the Model 3, because there's a lot for me that doesn't make sense there, and I look forward to covering that next. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, mach's gut, au revoir, tout à l'heure. My read is that stock price will be down another 10-20% because you don't have news coming from the company to help bolster that, given what was just delivered, both low numbers of Model 3s produced combined with missing the numbers on sales of the Model X and S. Thanks for taking time out. This is Greg from Tesla Fan Insight. Tschüss, mach's gut, au revoir, à tout à l'heure. Please like and subscribe. And if you watch a couple of ads, it helps us cover the expenses related to doing a better job.